Welcome everybody. Hello, my name is Matthew Taylor and welcome to our first Bush broadcast webinar of the spring, and it's called Valuing Culture on Bush Heritage Reserves. Now, I'm joining you today from Gadigal country, and I'd like to pay my respects to the Gadigal elders past, present and future. And I also recognise that as I stand on Australian soil, I stand on Aboriginal land. And for tens of thousands of years, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have been caring for country that we all inhabit, and we have a joint responsibility as Australians to walk into the future and continue that process. So as always, if you'd like to introduce yourself in the chat, please do so, and you can introduce your name and where you're joining us from. We always like to know where people are. And a warning for those of you down south, spring has definitely arrived. I've been hearing the cuckoos. First of all, the noisy channel bill cuckoo, and today I heard the first coel. So anybody living further south of me is about to have their night times disturbed for the rest of the summer. So good on you. Now, webinar format, we're going to introduce some fantastic guests today. And if you've got any questions as we go through the presentation and the conversation, please type them into the chat function. And we've got time at the end where we can talk to those questions and see if we can resolve as many as possible. We're going to talk today about culture and explore how the cultural landscape actually shapes our thinking, our experience, and the practice of actually looking after country. And we're going to start way out in far northwestern New South Wales, where we have our Nari Reserve and where we also help manage the adjacent Yantabulla Reserve for the South Endeavour Trust. This is Budgety country, where the traditional owners have close personal connections with the property. And since the purchase of Nari, Budgety elder Phil Eulo and his family have been helping us to understand the property's history, its natural values, and the very important cultural connections. So to introduce Phil and his family, before I actually introduce Phil himself and his daughter Kiara, here's a wonderful little 60-second video that we made.
So when Bush Heritage take on the management of a property, it's the cultural landscape, both the plants, the animals, the imprints of the ancestors of the traditional owner group that we are looking after.
It was really my wife Sue first sort of came up with the idea that wouldn't it be nice if we could link up with our traditional owner group that we work with and go through a process of repatriating those artefacts.
Eventually we came up with the idea of finding a property, a little place, a campsite on the river so we can put them back. I promised my mum a long time ago that I'd take care of country, and I have been.
It's just an absolute privilege to work with Budgety traditional owners, and it's so important that Budgety are involved in continuing to manage their country side by side with us at Bush Heritage.
Right, well, Uncle Phil and Kiara, how are you doing?
All right.
Good, thank you.
Excellent. Where are you joining us from today?
We are on Wanneroo country in Maitland at the moment.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Well, listen, your family, Phil, I know you were born in the area around Nari, and you've got a deep connection to the place and the surrounding Budgety country. Can you give us a bit of an insight into that, and also maybe talk about that promise you mentioned that you made to your mum about looking after country?
Yeah, the promise I made to her way back when I was working with Parks and Wildlife, National New South Wales. We had a meeting one day, and she said to me, "It's my turn to take over." So this is where I am today, and working with Nari for the last 5 years has been awesome. With my family and teaching them, especially my daughters and sons, how to look after country and what to do and what. With Dave, the first manager for Nari, we had a great time with Dave and Sue. Because I've done a bit of work with Sue in national parks in Queensland. It was great to meet up with those two and work with them again. And then Greg came along and it's even better.
Fantastic. And
Yeah.
I'd love to hear from you both how important it's been for you personally to get out and spend time on your country, and be able to take the kids and the grandkids there.
Well, as I said, my mum always, and Granny's always taken me on country as a little boy and growing up, and when I came away and done what I had to do in my life, younger, growing up and working and whatever, played my game of my sport, rugby league, which Mum let me do. But now I'm back on country and doing the work that I love more than anything, and that is looking after the native plantations and animals on the properties, and teaching me young generation all about it.
Fantastic. What about you, Kiara?
It's extremely important because, like, I wasn't born out on country as Dad was. So having Dad and him teach us and take us out on country and show us all the different plants and animals and all the stories that he'd learned, all the experiences that he'd gone through, helps build that connection and understanding of how important it is to know your identity and know your connection to country, know the environment, and how important it is to look after these aspects. And passing that on to our children is a part of our culture to begin with, and it's something that we naturally have done. Like, my father done it with all of me and my siblings, and I naturally do it with my children, and so on and so forth. We just want to continue that cycle of caring for country and making sure that our culture and heritage lives on and it's not completely lost like it could have been. So it's extremely important that we have this connection and that we go on country and that we learn and that we pay our respects to the people that have passed, which is our ancestors and our family. And
there's some lovely pictures coming up in the background for people showing, I don't know how many generations you've had together out on country. It looks like at least 4. Is that right?
There's a lot there, yeah.
There's a lot, yeah.
Well, that must be... Go on, Phil.
Would have been more if my mum and them had cameras back in their day.
Yes.
Would have been more, but we just...
Yeah, well, it's lovely. It's lovely to see so many happy faces having such a good time, enjoying the river and the billabongs and camping out.
No, it's beautiful country out there. I love it, and and love working with Bush Heritage on it.
Definitely.
Can you describe the country a bit, Phil? Because it's quite a mix of different landscapes, isn't it?
Well, we're river people, and we are river people. Our country is the river, what they call watershed. Mm-hmm. All the water that runs into the river is Budgety country, all the way down to the Darling, where it's spread out and runs into it. Yeah. But yeah, so...
and our river is the last free-flowing river in Australia that you can't actually pump water from.
Yeah. So we got that with the Queensland government signed off on that with...
the Ramsar Convention.
Richard Kingston Smith, yeah. He was with us then, working with us on that one.
The land's pretty dry in a sense, but it would have been, back in the day, really swampy, and would have had like lots of lush springs and would have been full of water because the Artesian Basin was naturally filtering water up through the clay pans.
It's natural water, the artesian water before white man settlement on the Paroo, and that sunk all those bores that we've done the study on.
Yeah.
And all that water's gone now, and all those gilguys and very little natural springs all dried up.
Yeah.
The mud springs that used to up here used to go up about 2 or 3 meters in there. We used to use for our skin, rubbing the mud on our skin and that for keep the mosquitoes and flies away and whatever. All those are delved back in themselves.
Yeah.
Because of all that water that's been taken out of the artesian. But I'm hearing on the grapevine that it's starting to fill up again, the water starting to come back in the springs up north.
Which is nice to hear.
I'll believe it when I see it.
That would be so fantastic if it was happening, Phil, because I know we've been working with local government to try and cap some of those bores, because there's a lot of leaky bores in the landscape, isn't there, that's just leaking water out. And sadly, one of the ones that got capped was the one that fed that lovely hot tank that was at Nari in David and Sue's days, which you could jump in at the end of the day, and boy, was that a lovely way to finish the day.
Very lovely.
Sorry, my grandfather Knuckle used to after riding horses all day, mustering sheep, we strip down to our shorts and go and lay in where the bore drain, where the old bore run out, because it was deep, about 3 or 4 metres, about a metre deep. And we used to lay in the hot water for half an hour.
Fantastic.
Refresh you. Yeah, beautiful.
Revitalise you.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I'd like to now introduce Vikki Parsley, who's our Aboriginal Partnerships Officer for the South East region. And Vikki, can you just tell us briefly what your role is and the work you do at Bush Heritage? Because I'd love to talk to you a bit more after that about, the cultural heritage surveys that we've mentioned earlier on.
Sure, thank you, Matthew. First of all, I'd just like to acknowledge I'm calling in from my ancestral lands today, Eulo and Walbunja country on the south coast of New South Wales. So as Matthew's just introduced me, I work in Aboriginal partnerships. So Aboriginal partnerships at Bush Heritage, we support Aboriginal communities right across the nation to basically have input and participate in reserves that we manage. So we work quite closely in Aboriginal partnerships with traditional owners to engage. There's a whole range of different operations that we have at Bush Heritage in terms of right way science approach, working closely with scientists. There's often conservation management plans and work that we do that aligns quite closely with the same aspirations of traditional owners. So that's where my role is important, in supporting traditional owners so that they can have access to country, as Uncle Phil and Kiara have so beautifully put today, and also recognising those values, the cultural values that are actually in the landscape itself.
Yes, fantastic. And can you perhaps go into a bit of the detail of what's actually involved in a cultural heritage survey? Because it's something I know we do when we first look at acquiring a property, but not necessarily that's the only time that it happens. But it'd be great to hear a bit about what's actually involved and how these assessments sort of are based on the culture and values of the traditional owners in the first place.
So cultural heritage surveys, there's a couple of parts that is involved in that. So it often means that we will identify traditional owners, ask them to come out on country. Just like in these photos here, we often have traditional owners that will come out, they get an opportunity to walk country, to identify any of the values. Those values can be from plants, it might be actually physical objects and sites, evidence that's left in the landscape from our old people as well. And these surveys, then we give traditional owners the opportunity to be able to document, work alongside us at Bush Heritage. And this way we're collaborating Indigenous knowledge systems with the work we're doing through science frameworks to try and improve the outcomes that we have long-term on our Bush Heritage sites. So surveys involve the physical aspect. There's lots of benefits there for traditional owners in terms of them, physically being able to access lands that potentially maybe in the past were landlocked or that they may not have necessarily had access to. So the importance of those surveys is very, very valuable with traditional owners. And it also means that they can be a little bit more self-determined and have input and say about how their lands are managed. And that reconnection itself of being able to go back and visit country is invaluable.
And that point, if it's the sorry, Phil, you're going to please do contribute.
Yeah, no, just said thanks, Vic. That was well done. All said, I meant.
Perfectly
And
said.
you know, I like to see this happen right across Australia. Really, we need to do these surveys first before anyone touch anything anywhere. It's a bit late now in places, but we can
Yes.
still go and survey these places
Move
from now
forward.
on and move forward.
Yeah, sure.
That's a very well made point, Phil, and it's something that Bush Heritage, I think, is hoping that we can set a bit of a precedent for other landowners and try and influence our neighbours, because there's always that fear that someone's going to find something and therefore I can't do something, when in fact what you're actually doing, in my understanding, is you're starting a relationship which can be incredibly valuable, and finding out about a landscape and stories and history that you know, you might never have otherwise understood. So it's the beginning of a journey in many cases, isn't it? And the beginning of a relationship.
It certainly is. Yeah, exactly.
100%.
And let's go into the future doing this sort of stuff before we touch anything. You know.
Yes.
Well, that's the opportunity I'm getting out there now at the moment with Bush Heritage. So I'm just waiting to see if I get a chance to go to this new national park that's been brought up the road from Nari.
Yes. Yes. We're all excited about that. It's going to be a great, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, listen, I'm going to introduce our next guest now. This is Vanessa Westcott, and she's been an ecologist with Bush Heritage for 8 years. Is that right, Vanessa? I think that's just a bit longer than me. We're becoming old timers now. We're going to have to watch this. Now, tell us about your role and what an ecologist actually means, and give us an idea what you're working on at the moment, apart from your two wonderful offspring, your lovely boys that we saw earlier.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Yes, I'm calling in today from Orange in New South Wales on Wiradjuri country. Yeah, I've been with Bush Heritage for, it's actually nearly 9 years, and I'm really proud and I feel really lucky to work for Bush Heritage. I've worked in Western Australia and New South Wales as an ecologist and a senior ecologist. And in Western Australia, I worked on our 3 Midwest properties. And I also helped to develop an Aboriginal partnership with Māori people on the Birriliburu Indigenous Protected Area. And now I'm in New South Wales, and my focus is with Phil and Kiara and family and the Budgety people on Nari and Yantabula Reserve. So I'm really lucky to be out there and spend time with Phil and family as much as I can with the 2 little tackers at home. Yeah, and right now my focus is on pitfall trapping. We're doing another round of pitfall trapping out there this year in a couple of months, and also our pig strategy, because pigs are one of the biggest threats there that we're trying to get a head around. It's quite a pig hotspot. So yes, working on that together.
And can you just explain? I think most people know what pitfall trapping is, but
yes.
Yeah, it's so exciting. Give us just a quick.
Okay, yes, you basically dig some holes into the ground and you run a short little fence along between the holes, and they're sort of buckets or pipes into the ground, and then you leave them out with the lids off overnight, and you get up really early in the morning, you go out there and there's this anticipation as you rock up, and then you look down into these little holes and you see these amazing little animals, and we measure them and monitor them, identify them, all those sorts of things, so we can understand what's out there and tailor our management, to look after them as best we can.
And the temptation is to stick your finger in and poke around to see what it is, but you're meant to use a stick, aren't you? That's what I was told.
There's a real skill to it. You've got to be very careful with the little animals and look after them, but they also can get quite feisty, so one has to be careful. Yes.
Well, listen, you mentioned that you'd worked in the West, and I know you've had the great privilege of working alongside Martu, Mulgana, Buddy Meyer, Nanda traditional owners over there, and now, as you say, with Phil and Kiara and family, with the Budgety. What does that mean to you, like as an individual, to have that sort of really valued input from traditional owners when you're looking at how to manage the landscape?
Yeah, so I've been really lucky to work with and meet and work with some amazing traditional owners, Phil and Kiara and Vikki included. But for me, my first real experience working really closely with traditional owners was the Birriliburu project with Māori. and it changed my life. It was really, really important to me. It taught me so much. One of the things I think about is, for them, healthy country is intimately linked with healthy people. And as an ecologist with a sort of Western training, that sort of thing takes time to get your head around, but it's so powerful. Yeah, and one of the things, I've got an example, we worked on a bilby project together, and bilbies used to occur over 70% of Australia, and now, because of foxes and cats and land use change and things, are now only over 15% of Australia, and most of that country is Aboriginal land. And so if anyone's going to save the bilby for all of us, it's Aboriginal people and rangers out on their country, and they're actually incredibly connected to the bilby. Madu, that I work with, are connected to the bilby and are super knowledgeable about it. And I learnt so much from them. I mean, about how to find their tracks and their burrows and the scats, the guna, and all that sort of thing. And one story that comes to mind was it was one of my first trips, and I was really keen, and I saw this fresh bilby track, and I was like, oh my gosh, Rita, because I was with a really beautiful elder who I just learnt so much from. Anyway, I said, Rita, I found a fresh track, and I started following it, and super keen, and she stood there and she watched me, and I kept going until I just got out of sight, and she goes, Ness, you're going the wrong way, and so I had to laugh. I said, Rita, you could have told me a little bit earlier, and we had a chuckle, and it was, she just taught me so much. She could see I was keen and I wanted to learn, and she shared with me things, and it was just incredibly powerful, and I'm very, very, very grateful. And we're still working on a bush tucker book together, so that's really, really cool. But yeah, I'm passionate about looking after the bush, and all the traditional owners I've worked with are the same, and I've learnt from them to listen, to have a laugh, and to share, and only through that are we going to really make a difference, I reckon. So, and just one more thing, I think, through that partnership, we've really, for me, I've learned a lot about right way science. Vikki mentioned it before, and Bush Heritage is really strong on that, and I'm really proud of that. So we try, wherever we're doing ecology work, to bring in and work with traditional owners as much as we can, and respect their knowledge, and work together. And we're supporting a national prize that sort of promotes people that are also doing that work across the country. So that's something that's really, really awesome, I think.
Well said.
Nice. You definitely bring it alive there, Vanessa. It's wonderful to see that amount of passion. Now we mentioned that it's a process of relationship and building understanding. And I know that conservation management is it's an ongoing process of engaging with traditional owners to understand the landscapes we've got and make some really good decisions, and particularly benefit from 60,000 years of wisdom in how to look after country. So Vikki, I'd love to hear from you, because I know you, switching our focus now to southeastern New South Wales, you've been doing a survey at our Tarcutta Hills Reserve, haven't you? Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, that's correct, Matthew. So we've got the Tarcutta Hills Reserve, and that's on Wiradjuri country. So I've been working quite closely with Wiradjuri elders and other traditional owners in the community. So there's a great photo there where we're actually out in the field. We've taken them through, given them access to that reserve, had conservation kind of conversations on the ground. We've actually got our healthy landscape manager and our ecologist that were present that day in the photos, as well with the reserve manager. So through that process, it was actually physically walking around the reserve. Uncle James Ingram here, that we can see in this slide, has done a number of cultural heritage surveys for us. So he's actually gone out and identified some of the modified trees that formerly our ancestors had gone and removed bark from for a whole range of different reasons, and identifying that as a particular resource. There's particular tree types that are quite significant to that process and to those collection of those materials. So Uncle James, and he's even in this next photo here, he's brought in some younger people who went in and were identifying some stone objects, items that were identified out in the field. So between the community, they've visited the site a couple of times now, walked physically over the whole landscape, and we're able to identify these values. And these are values that the Wiradjuri community see as being highly important and something that they want to maintain and protect. I know that, Kiara spoke before about that, connection to country and, where your spirituality comes from, because when we look at these landscapes, traditional owners don't just see those physical items, they're our old people's places. They're those special places in the landscape that give us our identity and our connection. So by people being able to participate in those surveys and identify that, it's also a part of, important part of cultural revitalisation and knowledge systems. So even though we're in contemporary, modern times, in the past, our traditional groups were guided by our elders, and we were taken out on country and we were shown and taught these things. So I like to look at this as well as a modern way that Bush Heritage is supporting communities by allowing them access and to do that. And there is the transition of that knowledge, having the elders present and then working down with the younger ones in the community. So that particular instance in itself is really important work that we're doing.
That's you said
Beautiful.
Yes, beautifully said, Vikki, because every time I've been on country and listened to stories being told, it makes such a profoundly powerful and deeper connection to understand that that's not just a hillside with a few weeds on it and a few interesting things that we would like to preserve, but there's actually a story behind it. There's a reason why it's there, and it connects to other things in the landscape. And then suddenly there's a rich fabric of story and wisdom, isn't there?
That's exactly right. And again, just having that enriches the work that we are doing as well, and just adds another layer of value to the conservation management processes that we're doing. I think I wanted to be mindful too in just saying that, and it's important to note at this time, that we only work with traditional owners, to the knowledge that they want to share with us. It's not a forced arrangement, it's not an expectation. And obviously we feel very privileged to be able to support communities and whatever knowledge they would like to share with us in the field.
It's very respect-based. Definitely respect-based.
And I think that's one of the things that we've learned, and I know our Bush Heritage staff learn as part of their cultural awareness as they join the organisation, is that that's the starting point, and a very important place to begin from. And it's something we can equally influence government even in, because I know that we get a grant from the government every now and again, and one of those was protecting our places, which has been used to assist in creating opportunities for communities to practice culture on country. And that was something I thought would be worth mentioning, Vikki, because I know you've been involved in that, and it's something we've taken advantage of and actively engaged in.
So with protecting our places, that's a state government funding that's available to communities. So at Bush Heritage, we've tapped into some of those grant funding streams so that we can actually support traditional owners to undertake and participate on country. But I actually think that to answer that question, one of the best people to talk about that is probably Uncle Phil, because there's a perfect example where we're supporting the Eulo family through protecting our places funding presently. So did you want to mention something about that, Uncle Phil, and what that has meant for you, your family, and the work that you're now undertaking at Nari for us?
Yeah, the protecting places one, all that new stuff that we're doing.
All the pop thing that we're doing is we're just trying to look after our artifacts and stuff that we've repatriated.
We've found too. We've found a few of them.
But Goanna found some for us too. So we've got our native animals looking for our artifacts, don't worry. Now it's good because we're trying to get our school kids out there. That's the thing that we're trying to do, get school kids there. Not only just Aboriginal kids to bring a friend.
Nice.
And learn together. Learn together. about the country and what we're trying to protect out there on bush heritage. This is what I'd like to see happen, and we're in the process of doing that at the moment. So hopefully it comes through.
And why it's important, like why the grant was important for protecting our ovens, like the clay ovens that we had found, and the campsites, like why that funding is important. We want to explain to the children so then they can explain to their friends, and then their friends can pass that on and, you know, break that cycle of not being 100% educated on why these steps are truly important to be taking.
Yeah, good.
I suppose that funding has provided opportunities to create employment, your cultural camps, so that you can educate and spread that information.
Really has. It allowed us to go to AAXIS. Is that how I always that up when I say it? But we went down to Canberra and we looked at we found artifacts there. We found recordings of language. We also found like native plant maps, but down one of the sides it will display the plant or the tree, and then when you look at the columns it will say if it was used for a ceremony or medicine or food. And there's all, not just our Budgety tribe, but there's also, like, there was a Murray one, there was a Wankamara, there was all the connecting tribes as well of this same format, which is absolutely amazing, because a lot of the traditional names and that, it's really hard to, because a lot of our elders a lot of them have passed. So a lot of the traditional names of certain things have gone with them.
Yeah.
So this helps us, because it's an older recording and an older map, it helps us to bring that language back as well, which would never have been able to take place if we didn't have the POP funding. Yeah. And another one, the Canberra, they went to Brisbane to the archives up there too for language.
Man, Hebony, and we've come across a lot of a fair bit of our language up there from me.
Carry on,
Of me grandma talking and grandfather talking, my grandmother and a brother. Yeah. Talking,
oh, that must have been very powerful, Phil, to hear your grandma and grandfather talking. The hairs on the back of my neck are going up right now.
It was, yeah.
It hits absolutely different.
Yes. Well, you mentioned cultural camps. Can you tell us a bit more what goes into a cultural camp, Phil? You've mentioned you get community out on country. It sounds like a great experience.
Yeah, well, I'd just like the children to just join in with me and how I was brought up, where I lived. Like, we never had much. We just had a tin shack, a tent. We lived in tents most time.
Humpies, yeah.
Humpies. So I just want to live a bit rough with me. Like, they'll be safe. But we just camp around the fire and cook around the fire outside in the open, you know, and things like that. We'll have quarters there at Nari, but
it's very luxury camping.
We just try and rough it a little bit here and there, you know, so they get a taste a little bit of it. Yeah.
But we take them out to the river.
Mainly walking through the bush and talking to them and showing them stuff and
going down the river
things and showing them different things and especially the artifacts, and they go through each artifacts and explain what my ancestors used them for, and you know, so they'll get an idea of what's happened in the earlier days.
And we're continuing certain stories as well. So it's not just on Nari. We'll go to Kiara National Park and go to, like, the lake where the Woonongata sleeps, and we'll explain why Woonongata's important and why he's there and what the story is.
Things like that.
Yeah, there's very, very different areas within the Budgety country that we go to nearly every time we go out there to pay respects, and we continue to tell our kids those stories. So when they bring someone out, or when it's their turn to look after, they know the stories 100% and know how to get there and know what they need to be doing to support our Budgety people in the country.
That's fantastic. And
great, I think.
So we do it every year, that culture camp too.
Yeah.
It's something that we do every single year during the Easter holidays.
Easter holidays, that's the time we go out there. The family, but if any other family want to come along and join in, that's fine.
We always try to invite everyone and anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess culture takes constant energy, doesn't it? And it's a constant education process, and it's lifelong learning, isn't it? And if you don't get in early with the younguns, so well, I wish I had my life over again, Phil. Sounds like a wonderful experience to be coming out on a culture camp. So it's lovely to hear about.
Like to see with schools. I'd like to see it come back. Done it with Ebony and Ben, and then when they were going to school, you know, I used to take them. But that's all went by the wayside when they left school. I never heard of it again.
Yeah, the
but now
initiatives
it's
got
starting
lost.
to come back again.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can get it all going again and getting the kids out
'Cause that was
together
a
and
big
learning
education.
together, you know, in the bush, learn in the bush.
Like,
Learn
learn
more
a
about
lot.
the country they're living in.
Yeah. In the area that they're in also, because we went to Mile Lakes, which is just up far from us, and we learn a lot about that country and that land just by doing these cultural camps that the school used to have as an initiative, but they lost it as soon as my eldest brother and sister left school.
Yeah.
And then they've only just started to come back, and I'm 33 years old, so I missed out on all of that. I was lucky because my parents got dragged to these camps and I got to get to go with them.
She's catching up now.
It sounds wonderful. And you've mentioned a few of the artifacts that you find, Phil. Can you just give us an example of one of the stories or one of the the things? I remember when I was visiting, I was shown, I think it was a stone hand axe, and it was just beautiful to hold in the hand, and very privileged to have a sense of what it felt like.
In the photo there you're looking at now, most of those are on Nari. That's a picture of Nari, but
that's it.
But
that would be caged now, Dad. I'm pretty sure that's the repatriation.
I think that's all of them we caged in.
Yeah, I believe it is.
All these ones in the front there, the little long ones, angular one, they're men's business. Those ones. They're mainly, they're like a marking stick too, like a message stick. They're also a burial stick, these ones here. But the ones in the back, they look like plates, part of plates and grinding stones. All of that, yeah. So, and actually, you gotta look at some of the stones, and they don't really come from there. They've been traded.
Some of them have been traded,
That's what you tell mainly the children, because they often some will come up and say, this one doesn't look like it come from here, you know, and it doesn't, so they've been traded.
Yeah.
Even the stone axe heads, they've been traded.
There's a lot out there. Yeah, there's a lot of stone tools out there that we've found.
A lot of different sort of stones.
A lot of different
colour,
ones, yeah.
Whatever. So,
yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, so they walk miles and miles and miles to crobberies and whatever and traded stuff there.
And what does the repatriation sort of process involve, Phil?
Well, we do a smoke and welcome to country to all the people that come along first up, and then we do the smoking ceremony and walk them through like we're doing here.
Yes.
And we walk up to where we are, where we're putting our stones away, and do another ceremony there.
And they're put in a safe place that they won't get disturbed.
We hope, yeah.
Yeah.
We hope. Well, on Bush Heritage and now at the moment, I think they're in a pretty good safe place.
Yeah, especially with the cage around it. These ones won't go anywhere.
Yeah, fantastic. Fantastic. Okay, well, listen, I've got one more question I wanted to sort of ask Vanessa, if you would, Vanessa, which is, how does Bush Heritage determine how the cultural heritage surveys we do feed into our property plans and the land management? What at an operational level, you know, how does that work when we're feeding it into a whole bunch of other things we're trying to prioritize around, you know, weeds, managing fire, ferals, and so forth? You got any examples of that to help us understand?
Yeah, sure. So Aboriginal cultural values is what we call a target, a capital T target. So it's something that's really important to us that we identify in all our management plans. It's something we care about and we want to work with our traditional owner partners to look after together. But it's important to say that different reserves are at different stages of understanding and sharing and working together on those things. So some of our more established reserves that we've had for a long time, we might have strong traditional owner partnerships, and there's been surveys undertaken and special places and stories the traditional owners have felt comfortable to share with us, and that's been able to be incorporated into our plans. We've been able to think about things like what's threatening those special things, those Aboriginal cultural values, and how can we work on preventing those threats from damaging those values, that sort of thing. So for an example, as Vikki mentioned, at Tarcutta, we've identified those, the traditional owners identified those special trees, and we've now been able to put that into our fire management planning. So there's fire management zones around those trees, and we're now having the conversation with the traditional owners about what should we do, or what do you want us to do, or what do you want to do to help protect those special trees from fire. So there's a flow on from those cultural surveys. It's an example of us putting it into practice when we're on the ground doing our management. But other reserves that are newer, we may not yet be at that stage. We're still just learning who the right people to talk to are, having those cups of teas and building the relationships, and we haven't yet had the surveys done. So there's different reserves at different stages. Excuse me. But I want to also say that the Aboriginal values on our properties, we don't just sort of park it off to one side. We try wherever we can to include it in whatever we do. So another example is any sort of earthworks we do. So at Nari, Phil was part of some decommissioning of water points. Yeah. And what did you have to do, Phil? You have to tell us.
Yeah, I was just standing there with watching the dozer push the load of filling the dams in, and Mike going through every sweep that he made. I followed him, checked it all out, and made sure there was nothing there in the way, or he's unearthed anything. Yeah.
Yeah, because those artificial water points were, old pastoralists sort of pushed up the earth to keep water, and what that does now is it attracts the goats and the pigs. So we don't really want them anymore, but they were often put in really special places where there might be artifacts and other important cultural heritage values. So we have to be really careful. There's another example is at Bon Bon, there's a lot of rabbit warrens, and we had to do some ripping. So the traditional owners came in and helped us check that there was nothing there that we're going to damage. Another example is erosion works at Bulkamata. That's just recently happened in South Australia, where the traditional owners come and check before that earthworks happens. Another example is in our engagement. So at Charles Durham Reserve on Buddymire country, we had some open days when I was over there, and we're basically trying to encourage the locals to come. And we incorporated in the loop that we took the tour loop. The traditional owners wanted to come and share a story about a special place, so that became part of the loop. So all of a sudden the traditional owners have a chance to share their knowledge that they wanted to with the locals and educate them a bit. There's an opportunity to have a conversation, and so we're basically trying to bring Aboriginal people, or the traditional owners, and their values into the properties as best we can wherever we can. We really do genuinely try to do that, and that's something that's important to me as somebody who works with Bush Heritage. That's, really. And the other thing we're working on at the moment is how to measure how well we're doing at that and how we could do better. How many trips on country have there been? How many right way science projects are underway? How have those fire protection zones actually protected the special places? Those kinds of things we're trying to measure and do better. Yeah.
That's fantastic, Vanessa.
We can map that too, can't we, Vanessa, through our conservation management project planning tools that we have online. There's a bit of a matrix there so we can gauge how we're travelling. And I think it's also worthwhile just noting that we work within the cultural heritage frameworks and legislation for each state and territory, because we are a national body. So, that process you were talking about before is due diligence in New South Wales under the cultural heritage current legislation that we have. So yeah, just worth noting that each state and territory has different frameworks there, and Bush Heritage work alongside the traditional owners to support that as well.
And that's generally the minimum we do, isn't it, Vikki?
Yes.
That's just the minimum basic requirements. And after that, there's a whole lot more of getting to know and getting involved. Well, listen, you touched on something there, and I think you're on perfect timing. Let's move to some of the questions now. And just a reminder, everybody, if you do have any questions, please stick them in the chat function, and we'll see if we can get them answered. One of the things that came up early was a really good question about sometimes there's conflict. You know, we're all very friendly and we've all got to know each other over time. It's not always a smooth road. And so the question was, does it happen that there's a conflict between what science or our planning wants to do or to achieve and what the traditional owner view of the landscape might be? And I'm sure it's not harmony all the time. So the question is, if so, how's that resolved? How do we go about resolving that?
So I did touch on before, talking a little bit about Bush Heritage. We're really big on the current Indigenous cultural and intellectual procurement procedures. So under that, you know, there's no expectation when we're working with traditional owners for them to give us knowledge. You know, that's part of the relationship building and partnership that Vanessa touched on. I think you spoke about that as well earlier, Matthew. Yes. Once we sort of get to that type of connection and working relationship with community, this is all led by Aboriginal communities and traditional owners. They have the right to, you know, give us what information they would like to share. Of course, you know, there are times where community may not want to share that. And it's quite interesting that you bring this up, because one of the current things that keeps coming up is about right way science. And sometimes when we're partnering with traditional owners, their understanding of what actually right way science is and how Indigenous knowledge systems can collaborate with Western. The current take I have on it when I'm working with communities is to sort of explain that by doing so, what knowledge they would like to resolve or share with us is something that we will be feeding into our conservation management planning procedures, and that will only benefit community in the long run as well. We do manage that in a sensitive light. So if there are, for instances, times where people have concerns or they don't want to share, or there could be conflict in, you know, we say that we've always been here on country. Our people came from this land, you know, and science doesn't always necessarily understand that, given our oral histories and the way that our cultural belief systems and values are set up. So just in light of that, as I mentioned, there's sort of no expectation. We do try to sensitively manage and work around knowledge that people do want to give us. In times of conflict, we've always engaged and had good open conversations to try and resolve any kinds of issues that come up at the start, and to do that in a sensitive manner so that, you know, we don't want to upset people. It's not about that. And that's, of course, the value and the importance of having people like myself working in the Aboriginal partnership space across Australia, because we can be the people that can come in and work with community and have those conversations, and of course work quite closely with the scientists at Bush Heritage as well. So we have a science and conservation team that are actually in the process now of trying to develop sensitive and appropriate data systems. And of course that is something that can be quite tedious, because that can be layered with so many different levels of knowledge in itself. Because in Aboriginal culture, we have both tangible and intangible aspects of my culture. There are things that I can see and I can take you out on country and show you. And then there are other places I can take you where, you know, I have those oral histories passed down about the ancestors and the spirits and the creators that live in that landscape. And you may not be able to physically see that, but we know that they're there. We have that connection with them. So that type of knowledge is always respectfully managed at Bush Heritage. And we do our best to support communities in leading that space with us and giving us the guidance.
Yep.
Yes, thanks, Vikki. That's excellent. Another question that's come up is about the cultural camps, and I guess this is a two-parter answer with diplomacy, which is that are they ever hampered by the health and safety requirements? Phil, you were describing it as an opportunity to get bush and live a bit rougher than you might be used to. But health and safety is always critical, isn't it? So
Yeah.
I know you take very good care of people when you're out there.
Oh yeah, yeah,
100%.
that's 100% that one. First, like safety first. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's certainly something that Bush Heritage is very strong on. In the health and safety, a staggering number of checklists I have to fill out before I can get on country to make sure everything's been covered.
Yeah,
So,
not say, oh, you've done this before. Greg sits down with you.
Even the kids sit down and go through the inductions.
Go soon again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Safety's a priority.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Really good for what we're doing there.
Yeah, taking care of individuals the same way we take care of country, eh?
Yeah, mate.
100%.
Exactly.
Excellent. One of the things I know I experienced when I last visited Nari was the work you're doing on the plants there. And I know there's work on the budgetary traditional use of plants. And is that little booklet still going strong? I think it was maybe a leaflet I saw the first time.
Oh, the little booklet? Yeah, we're updating. Adding more to it and we've got better photos of some of the plants, so we're
excellent.
It's photos, but that is in our POP plan at the moment, the protecting of places.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Fixing the booklet up, and we're also creating a really cool poster of native local plants that you can find on Nari.
Yeah, that's excellent, because I know driving around Nari, if you suddenly match up what was in the first version of the booklet and you come across the tree itself and you go, oh, this is fantastic, and then get the story.
Really
and it's nice process. Okay, well, I think we've covered most of the questions that have been coming up. I just want to finish with one, perhaps Vanessa, this may be one for you, and this is about, do you have any advice for other organizations? We've talked about how we're taking a bit of a lead role, we think, in inviting traditional owners onto country and sharing the management of and the taking care of country. Any advice you'd give to other landowners or other organizations wanting to tread this path?
Do what Bush Heritage.
You're just on mute there, Vanessa.
Well, last time.
Just coming back. We lost it.
My internet dropped out. I missed it. Sorry.
You're back. I was asking you, in your great wisdom, with your great number of years at Bush Heritage, what advice would you give to other organizations or individuals who might be moved by the conversation we've had today to sort of reach out and collaborate with traditional owners more extensively?
I think your work will only be richer for it, and start slowly and carefully and have a cup of tea and chat, and don't rush it and force it, and find a mutual point of interest that you're passionate about, and it will only make the work you do better and stronger and be more rewarding. And there's not only sort of ecological conservation benefits, but social, personal, professional, but like, it's just such a good thing to do. And I'm so glad I had the opportunity. I'm so grateful for Bush Heritage. And I think, Bush Heritage would like to think that if people want some advice, that we would, I'm sure if people got in touch with us, we would direct you to the Vikkis or the Phils to help, because we want not only Bush Heritage to do well, but we want to share the learnings and the opportunities with others beyond our borders, our properties and partnerships.
Fantastic, Vanessa. Any last words from you, Uncle Phil, or from you, Kiara?
Yeah, and I always said, I wish this was taught back in when I was a young boy growing up, with my friends, white kids and Chinese kids and whatever, New Australians. I wish we could learn together like we are trying to do now. I think Australia would have been a better place to live in at the moment. Right now, if it was taught back when I was a kid, with the, like, I mean, we're coming together now, as it is in sports and whatever, and all the other things that goes along, work and whatever. we get along pretty well. You know,
Would have been nice to be done earlier,
But
though. I get you.
would have been nice if it was done short. But in my day, we were separated, blacks over there, whites over there, you know,
Yes.
which was terribly wrong.
Yeah, indeed. Well, we've got a lot of work to do, but thank goodness we've got such a fantastic relationship that we do have. And thank you so much for joining us today, Uncle Phil. Thank you, Kiara, for handling the tech at the beginning and getting us on. And thanks, Vanessa and Vikki, for joining us and giving such excellent insights into the work. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Hope you've had fun getting a different insight into how things work. And if you'd like to stick around, as usual, we've got a couple of minutes with some more wonderful pictures of the wildlife that we focused on people today, but there's some wonderful wildlife out at Nari. And there's some lovely pictures coming up. Keep an eye out for the crucifix toad, a personal favorite.
They're so cute.
Never seen one, but they have to be one of the cutest animals in the world.
Very cool. I was surprised when I found them all out there last time I was out there.
Did you?
I was hanging out with them for a long time.
Oh, I'm so envious. So envious. All right. Thanks, folks, and look forward to seeing you at the next webinar.
Yeah.
Cheerio. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.